I'm Linda at American Patchwork and Quilting, and I'm here with Angela Walters, Ambassador for Handy Quilter, and we're going to talk a little bit about whether you choose to use a pantograph for your quilting, whether you mark your designs, or whether you work freehand, and you've got some great tips for us on all of those things. So let's start with a pantograph.
Absolutely. Well, when you first get your long arm, it can be a little overwhelming.
Absolutely.
You're not sure how the machine quilting process goes, so a pantograph is a great first step, and this is what it looks like. Now, of course, it goes on the back of your machine, and you trace along it with a laser, which means you can get some really intricate designs easily on your quilt. So very good first step. But the limitation is, which I think you might even get ready to say, is that you can't see what's happening with your quilt. So if you're working with a quilt that has some issues, which I'm sure yours don't, but mine would, like lumpy seams or something like that, you can't handle those from the back. So for myself, I like to work from the front of the machine, but that can seem really overwhelming to some people because they don't have that tracing to go with. But that's when a good next step would be marking out the designs, and that's what I have to show you on the next quilt.
All right.
So let's say you're looking at your quilt and you want to add a nice element like a nice big feather, like I've done here, and you're not confident enough to do it on your own. Well, go ahead and mark it out. And what I have and what I use for my marking is just a simple, basic, water-soluble marker by Dritz. I know there's a lot of great products on the market, a lot of new products, but I like to stick with what I've always used. It's never let me down, right? So when you're starting, what you could do is, if you wanted, you could mark out each part of this element and then quilt along it. So that's your guideline.
Okay.
Now, I would encourage you, once you feel comfortable with this design, then maybe just marking out the stem and then freehanding the feathers. Try to use this more as a temporary crutch, not so much as something that you want to use every time, because if you have to mark it and then remove it, and then if you miss the line anyway, then you're frustrated all over again. So maybe just marking out part of it. But one thing that I like to say is, instead of worrying about perfection, focus more on symmetry, and the next quilt I have shows you exactly that.
That's great.
So one thing I like to do is, I love to quilt my quilts to death, of course. I like a lot of quilting, and here I've done, some intricate stuff, but I actually don't mark much of my quilting at all, if any.
Really?
I freehand it all, and I think if you look really closely, you would see that it's not necessarily perfect, but it is symmetrical. So instead of focusing on the perfection of your quilting designs, aim for symmetry. Now, what I mean by that is, here I have this motif here, and so where this swirl comes out, I'm going to do the same on the other side.
Oh. So
now, if you look at the individual swirls, they're not the same size, but it gives that look of perfection because it's symmetrical. So I have one swirl here, I have the other one over here. So I'm focusing less on the perfection and more on the symmetry.
that takes a lot of the pressure off.
It does, and I think our eyes see perfection in other people's quilting. We just need to see perfection in our own, right?
Have to work on that, that's for sure.
So let's say this is the area of your quilt that you're wanting to quilt something, and what I would do, instead of marking the whole thing, is maybe just mark the center of your motif, and then just one side of it. So let's say you want the swirl to come out like this. Now, this is not a roadmap, this is more of a guideline. It's a suggestion.
Okay.
So don't feel like you have to keep it on, on the line every time. You just kind of want to use that to see how far you want it to go out. So I'm going to start in the center here, and then quilt up to the top. And of course, let me trim this thread. Don't want to get caught up in those little things. All right, so let's quilt it. So I have my mark here. I'm going to go ahead and quilt my swirl. Let's say I want to go ahead and echo it another couple times because I want to add a little bit more to it. Tuck it in here. Now I just know that I want to do the same thing on the other side.
Okay.
So I want that swirl to come out and face the same direction. And I want to bring it back. And then since I echoed that one a couple times, I'm going to echo this one the same way. Now this is a really basic example. You could do a lot of stuff even in the center. Now I'm just playing around. But when you're done, you get something that looks symmetrical, but it's not perfect. I mean, this one comes out further than the other, but who's going to notice once the quilt is finished? It's an easy way to get nice looking quilting with very little marking.
I love that because I don't want to have to spend my time marking it. I want to spend my time quilting it.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for these great tips. I really appreciate the ideas you've provided as to how to mark when I need to and how to just wing it when we don't. We hope that whether you choose to quilt with a pantograph or freehand or doing a little bit of marking like we did here, that you can conquer your next project with ease.